think they're ready to surrender?
INA की बागी फौजियों पर अंग्रेज देशद्रोह का मुकदमा चलाएंगे।
उन तीनों के बचने के चांसेस कम हैं।
ये कोई आम केस नहीं, कोर्ट मार्शल है। बोला भाई, ये केस आप कांग्रेस के लिए नहीं, सुभाष बोस के लिए लड़ी।
Lieutenant Gobak Singh Dillon, Captain Shah Nawaz Khan, Captain P.K. Sehgal. Section 41, waging war against the king. You are charged with murder. Do you plead guilty to the charges read out?
ईमानदारी से आजादी के लिए लड़ने वाली अगर कोई फौज है तो उसका नाम है आजाद हिंद फौज।
The safety, honor and welfare of your country comes first, always.
British Indian Army hand you over to the Japanese Imperial Army.
हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया।
इस बार कुछ ऊपर नीचे हुआ तो देश में बवाल मच जाए। अब जनता किसी अंग्रेज को नहीं छोड़ेगी।
रात दिन अपने सीने विच वजदी आजादी दे राग नू बंद कर ला।
अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं?
आज हिंदुस्तानी फौज के पास अपना असली मकसद है, हिंदुस्तान की आजादी।
तुम मुझे खून दो, मैं तुम्हें आजादी दूंगा।
ये मुकदमा पूरी इंडियन नेशनल आर्मी का है।
क्योंकि हमने वो दिन देखा है जब हमें ऐसा लगा था कि हमने हिंदुस्तान को वाकई आजाद कर दिया।
देश की आजादी की लड़ाई कोर्ट में लड़ी जा रही है और इस वक्त पूरा देश एक साथ तैनात है।
This trial and its judgment shall be remembered throughout history.
Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya. Today we will discuss Indo-US strategic ties. India and United States of America have decided to further strengthen defense and security partnership and cooperation against terror outfits. In the joint statement after the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump earlier this week, Pakistan was publicly called out for backing terror groups. Designation of Kashmiri extremist Syed Salahuddin as a global terrorist by the State Department during Modi's visit was also a significant move by the United States. Over the last couple of years, India has become one of the largest buyers of the US defense equipment, approximately worth $15 billion. With United States designating India as a major defense partner on par with its closest allies, the bilateral defense trade could well soon be $20 billion in next few years. The United States and India bonhomie has also rattled China and Pakistan. For a detailed discussion on this, we are joined by distinguished guests in the studio out here. Let me introduce you to them. We have Mr. Manoj Joshi with us, Distinguished Fellow of ORF. We also have Mr. Rajiv Nayan, Senior Research Associate IDSA, and we have the National Security Expert Bharat Karnad. So welcome to the show. Let me begin with you, Mr. Bharat, and let's straight away catch the bull by the horns. Is this sort of a very positive sign for India as far as its neighborhood security scenario is concerned and its strategic and defense ties with the United States is concerned? I'm talking about the Modi-US joint statement and the meet.
Yeah, well, I don't know what you mean by positive. The problem is that I think we can often get tripped up by phrases that we tend to overlook, that the other side might have kind of got into the text. Mm-hmm. For instance, in reference to Syed Salahuddin, he is located in the text as being from Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir. Mm-hmm. Now, when you say Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir, that basically means that neither the US nor anybody else in their cohort of nations recognizes Jammu and Kashmir as part of Indian territory. Mm-hmm. Now, how did this pass our diplomats who were there to settle on the text. After all, we are claiming that all of Kashmir is ours. Certainly what's with us is ours, very definitely. And in the text you have the phrase, Indian administered J&K. So I think these are problems that should have been sorted out well before it went to the formal plenary where it was accepted. Now, the other thing I think is that so far we have had off-the-shelf buys. I mean, that's as far as terrorism and so on. That's a major problem, by the way, and it better be recognized as such. There's going to be a hurdle in the future. The other thing is, I think, while we're going to have off-the-shelf buys, we have done so in the past, some $12 to $15 billion worth of transport planes and so on and so forth, maritime reconnaissance planes. When you get down to hard fighting assets, you may have a problem if you go in for too many of them, because the US always reserves the right to cut off spares. It has happened time and again, wherein they cut off spares, or some congressional committee decides that India has not been friendly enough or works against its interests, and therefore it needs to be sanctioned, punished, whatever, and the spares are cut off. Now, you then have a situation where your entire fleets could be grounded, your artillery systems could be, inactive, rendered inactive. So this is a problem that we need to be, these are problems we need to be aware of when we are getting centrally into a supply relationship with the United States in the military sphere.
Okay, let's we'll take up the military aspect and the defense aspect a little later. Let me go to Mr. Joshi out here, and let's first go to the terror point of view. As Mr. Bharat pointed out, that that particular slip in the statement mentioning Kashmir as Indian administered Kashmir is something which should not have been there. But do you also consider the very fact that Salahuddin being named as SDGT by the United States State Department is a sort of a victory for India, given the fact that India has been trying to get this done in the United Nations for quite some time, but it's not happening, along with Masood Azhar?
I don't think we were targeting Salahuddin. First. Number two, Salahuddin, 71 years old. He was an active militant, and I use the word militant deliberately, not terrorist, because I think the government of India tends to confuse the two.
Okay.
He is an active militant in the early 90s. He was effective in the early 90s. Hizbul Mujahideen was a force in the early 90s. Today, the Hizbul Mujahideen is virtually, whatever happens is the Valley thing. They appear on Facebook, etc. They are not a very significant force. And number two, anything that happens in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir is essentially controlled by the ISI. So, someone like Salahuddin, he may have symbolic value, but that's about it. So, the US has been very clever in picking up this old chap out there. Yes, he has symbolic value, but as far as the Masood Azhars go or the Lashkar-e-Taiba go, they are the real threat. They are still there.
They're still there.
They're still there.
And nothing significant has come out on them.
They've been designated terrorists. But designating terrorists doesn't get you any. By the UN saying you are a terrorist, it doesn't matter. What matters is, can you take out those terrorists?
Moving a step further ahead and working against them. That's what it is.
With a terrorist, you need to wipe him out. You see, the point is designating someone something. Yes, it gives you some satisfaction, but I would say, okay, no big deal.
No big deal. Mr. Nayan, do you also agree with both our guests out here that yes, this is a symbolic sort of step which has been taken by United States, but not a big deal as far as fight against terror is concerned?
Yes, I agree with both of them that it's but we must admit it's a significant move. At least they designated. They were not designating some of these entities as terrorist organizations. In fact, the entire Pakistan, the entire country should be designated as a terrorist country, but it may happen in the future. But one correction I would just like to point out about the joint statement. Joint statement nowhere mentioned Indian administered Kashmir. It is US notification that talks about that. So this is general US understanding that this is Indian administered and this is Pakistan administered. Gradually this narrative may also change, and we should try to change it, because the entire, I agree with Bharat completely, this entire Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, part of Indian territory, and we should start asserting about it. We have not been doing it. We are somewhat quiet about Pakistan occupied Kashmir, there are many interpretations, there are many solutions about the problem. So I think partly we are responsible. So that this is what I am saying. Now fighting terrorism, why it is happening? United States has to take India seriously. It has to take India seriously because, not because of India only. The voice is coming from Afghanistan also. The recently held Kabul process really underlined how Pakistan has become a serious problem. Afghanistani rulers, they shouted that on the one hand, you are giving money to us to reconstruct Afghanistan. On the other hand, you are giving money to Pakistan to destroy it. So you have to take it seriously. You just cannot be so casual about it. You have to think seriously about Pakistan. And the whole world knows, even Pakistani, American officials know, other elements in the official establishment know, that Pakistan is the origin of the global terrorism.
And that is something which has been pointed out in the joint statement.
He has to
as
become
well.
serious.
Let me,
one more point I would just like to mention, like about gentleman, the current president, he's so inconsistent. Like earlier he promised to target a country like Pakistan. In fact, in January, just after taking the oath, he released the coalition, that coalition support fund, and he released about more than $500 million. And so we have to keep putting pressure on United States current president, Mr. Trump. Otherwise, he may vacillate. So this is what we have to underline.
We'll have to keep on putting pressure. But one point which Mr. Nayan pointed out, and that's also a very significant area to look at, is the Afghan theatre. You know, what role can India play in Afghanistan? What role United States might want India to play in Pakistan, in Afghanistan rather? And there's been no significant statement which has come out yet. We're expecting the United States to spell out its Afghan policy in maybe a few weeks from now. What do you think might be play out here as far as India's role in Afghanistan vis-a-vis the United States is concerned?
Well, for one thing, I don't think we should be in Afghanistan because the United States wants us to be in Afghanistan, as you mentioned. We have our own role, we have our own interests independent of everybody else. We have to be there. We are a player. We have to assert ourselves, our interests, protect our interests and safeguard them. Now, the Ashraf Ghani regime there is extremely friendly to us. We have just established the air corridor and so on for supply of that regime and keeping up a very active and dynamic supply link. Now, that said, the point I think is that because we have our own interests, these do not necessarily converge with either those of the United States or of China, which has come into the scene right now because it has just, you just heard them stage a meeting with the Afghans and the Pakistanis, wherein both the Afghans and the Pakistani regimes have accepted the Chinese role and the fact of trying to conciliate and accept some kind of a, ceasefire kind of an arrangement.
Sort of a Chinese mediation.
Yes, a Chinese mediation has now become formal. Now, consider this, that the United States in all the years, previous years, starting from Bush years to the Obama years, nothing has happened in the Trump years, but the Ankara, the Chicago, all those parleys that they had in Afghanistan, India was frozen out of it. We were no part of it. We were not invited to it, right? Why? Because the Pakistanis didn't want us to be invited, and the Washington establishment, in a sense, conceded the Pakistani point. Now, this is the real problem, that we do not seem to act independent of some big power holding a hand and bringing us in. Why are we so dependent on any third power or any external party? If we want to, we should do as the Chinese have done. Let's sit down and start our own thing, have our own parley, our own forum to advance our interests.
But then there is a huge obstacle that we also have the same charges against Pakistan as Afghanistan has. So, it doesn't seem like that Pakistan would agree to us mediating between, or rather India mediating between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
It's not a matter of mediation. It's a matter of having a forum wherein you push your interests in concert with the Kabul regime. That's the thing to do. But we haven't even done that very well. And this is the real problem.
Let me bring in Mr. Joshi here. Mr. Joshi, do you agree that this is one place, again, where we have lacked, and we should have pushed forward in terms of our role in our neighborhood, specifically Afghanistan, when it comes to the United States role or Pakistan's role or China's role out there?
Well, you know, first is the very obvious thing, we lack land access. Okay. Secondly, we have been dawdling over this whole Chabahar. You know, the Chabahar thing came up as far back as 2000, 2002. And for 1 decade, we did nothing. Through Chabahar, through the Zaranj-Dilaram road, we would have had, and if we had developed that corridor, we would have had access. Now, the problem is that we are caught in a bind here. If you look at Mr. Trump, he has a very harsh policy towards Iran. And we don't know which way the American policy towards Iran will go in the future. If the US-Iran tension increases, and most likely it will, we may find ourselves in the middle because our very valuable project and a very valuable geopolitical aim through Chabahar will get undermined. Now, without land access, operating in Afghanistan is not easy. We've got to work out, you know, the thing is that if you are players, after all, we were players through the Northern Alliance in the past. If you are players, but the second thing you need to do is to put in money. Now, we have in the past put in money. We are one of the leading, we have a number of projects out there. But, you know, when it comes to security, the money aim as far as Afghanistan is concerned, Afghanistan is right now in a very precarious situation. And it requires a lot of support. It requires us, if we want to be players. See, what I think what Bharat is trying to get at is that China has suddenly emerged from nowhere and become a player there. Okay, and it is doing mediation, etc.
And we should also play an independent role. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, if you have the gumption, yes, because so far we have played a role under the cover of the United States. When the US said stay out, we stayed out. When the US said come in, now we are looking at it. And this is the worst moment to go in. This is when Afghanistan has become a quagmire. And if you land up there, you go there at your peril. So when in 2007 or even earlier, when we wanted to play a role, I remember being in Kabul when we presented the Afghan forces with 200 small trucks, you know, which had to go via Iran, by the way, because they couldn't go through Pakistan. So we have the ability to do it, but we need a concentrated idea as to what exactly we want to achieve.
What exactly is to be done, and there are perils, but then something has to be done. One very important aspect in this entire Indo-US strategic ties is the defense aspect, as in what we want to buy, what United States wants to sell to us, whether it is useful to us or not. And as you pointed out in the beginning, it's, you know, having that pact with all the stuff from United States won't be a good idea. But then our defense spend in the United States is increasing with each passing year. As I was saying in the beginning, that and that's an estimate which has been given by several study groups, that it might cross $20 billion in next few years. Is that a well thought out move as far as India is concerned? Okay. Mr. Bharat first, and then you.
Essentially, no. As I said, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. The fact is, there's a great difference between our very old and traditional suppliers like Russia and America. The Americans and most other suppliers stick to their contractual obligations, while the Americans reserve the right to retroactively change the contractual language. In other words, if tomorrow they decide, after having signed the contract for, say, some combat aircraft, the F-16 or something, tomorrow the Congress, say, decides that we have done something they don't like, they'll cut off aid. There's nothing we can do. They can rewrite the laws, and the contracts mean nothing. They can be retroactively changed, and they reserve the right to do so.
But now, we have a long list, Bharat. We have, you know, C-130J, C-17.
These are transport planes. These are not fighting assets.
P-81 Harpoon missiles, you know, Apache, Chinook. We are now getting 22 Guardian drones as well. But the F-16 is something which might happen, might not happen.
But this applies to all the fighting assets, whether you call, you know, you're referring to drones or to the Apache attack helicopters or anything else. F-16 was merely one thing I mentioned, but this applies to just about everything. Because all they have to do to ground your fleet, to ground your asset, is to stop the supply of spares or servicing support. That's it. And they don't give a damn what the outcomes are for India. And this is what we need to be very, very concerned and be sensitive about in our own interest, which we don't seem to. We seem to be gung-ho about the American link and we want to cultivate it. But is there any guarantee that they're going to stick to the contract in terms of supply? We are not sure of that, and it is not there. It cannot be guaranteed.
Okay, but Mr. Nayan, this time it is said that the United States designated India as a major defense partner at par with the closest allies. So doesn't that sort of assuage the concerns which are raised by Mr. Karnad out here?
No, look, this is a political statement, and they have admitted also.
Okay.
Thereafter, of course, in January they brought out a notice. Federal Register brought out a notice and delineated what may happen under major major defense partner. In export control terms, it means nothing. It is just removing one additional layer.
Okay.
Now it is presumption of approval. Means if I am ready to supply you, it will be supplied. So what we should see and what we should really cause in last several years, especially after the removal of sanctions, they just see change in US attitude. They want our defense market. So whether you dub it the major defense partner or not, they have been trying. In fact, they were offering us cooperation in ballistic missile defense. And we shouted that our defense labs are on your entity list, on your control list, and you are talking about making us a partner in ballistic missile defense. So what US is trying to do is to sell major platforms and take money out of us. There are still, if you read, I have got the copy of that notice that still talks about restrictions.
Okay.
It's just not that you are getting technology like anything. So there will be restrictions.
There will be restrictions.
There will be restrictions, and what they want to sell, they will sell.
Okay.
What they don't want to sell, they will not sell. But yeah, we should not just simply dismiss it. It's a development. In fact, this
it's an ongoing process. Let's be positive. That's what you're trying to say.
Drone was once controlled. It is on the MTCR list.
Okay.
And this is being liberalized. So we should not just dismiss it. But my point is a bit different. We have got potential. We have got capability. But our acquisition process, our armed forces are not cooperating to just push the indigenous development. This is the problem. You have got private sector, private universities having patents in drones. So you have to just hold their hands, and you will be exporting it outside instead of you importing it inside. So this is my major problem.
Let me bring in Mr. Joshi here. Mr. Joshi, do you agree with the points which are being made by Mr. Karnad and Mr. Nayan out here that this is going to be a big problem in the later stages if we stock all our eggs in that one basket, that's United States of America, the defense equipments, the strategic acquisitions are concerned?
Look, I think when it comes to defense and security, at the end of the day, you have to have your eggs in your own basket. Okay?
Well, so, that's of paramount importance, but that's unlikely to happen in the near future.
What I'm trying to say is, yes, we've made a complete mess as far as defense R&D and defense production industrialization is concerned. But my point is, do we have to continue with that mess? There is no reason why we can't begin a process, and that process, mind you, will take you 15 to 30 years. But let's at least get it underway. At least this government should have thought that way. But it's going in a greater, at a greater rate to develop dependency. We were once dependent on the Soviet Union and Russia. Now we become dependent on the America. Now, Bharat hasn't even told you that every equipment they sell, they have something called the end user monitoring and the enhanced end user monitoring, EUM, and every equipment, there are conditions. There is nothing you get without conditions. We have got the Jalashwa, that big USS Trenton. There are conditions on which it can be used. It can't be used in certain circumstances. Now, in that situation, I can understand if you have, when you have the requirement of an emergency buy of equipment from another country. But if you don't have the requirement, you are a nuclear armed country. Okay, you do not face any existential threat because you have nuclear weapons. Terrorism is not an existential threat, but unfortunately our politicians make it out to be a big existential threat. What will terrorists do? Kill 200, 300, 400 people, 500 people? That's not an existential threat. You have nuclear weapons. You can take out entire cities. Use that as a cover to try and get this defense industrialization right. And unfortunately, what we are seeing is this empty slogan called "Make in India," under which you are actually becoming, you are going back to the era of licensed production and acquisition.
Okay, that demands a completely entire separate discussion. But before we conclude this one on Indo-US strategic ties, one very important question, and I would like quick comments from you. We're running out of time. Is the decision to have, or rather, go on with the Malabar naval exercises? This is something which happens, but then this time around there is a significant mention of that in the joint statement. And this has been responded to by China also, that, you know, stay away. This is going to be, in fact, the Chinese media has quote unquote said that Indo-US, bonhomie will be catastrophic for India. Is that, sort of overstating the things?
Look, when the Chinese say it, they are saying it from their point of view. And maybe objectively also it is, because, you know, for all the reasons that we have mentioned, it may in fact turn out to be catastrophic. But the point, I think, is in trying to diversify our supply, we may be compounding our problem of dependency, arms dependency. Now, and this is something that needs a systemic solution, and we are nowhere near it. This government has talked but not walked the talk. It's just talked and talked, you know, about Make in India this, Make in India that. The DPP is still not completely articulated. No one's quite sure how the strategic partners are. I mean, this is into our 70th decade, 7 decades, sorry, of existence. You have this problem. Now, if the government cannot get simple things right, how do you expect they'll get the more complex things right? And this is a problem. So we have to get things right and understand that if we end up buying our protection, buying our security wherewithal from foreign countries, then we'll be in hock to those countries. They will be controlling our destiny.
They'll
and
be controlling the movements, they'll be controlling the decision making, the policy making and all that. Quickly, Mr. Nayan, what's your take on that?
No, definitely this Malabar exercise, actually this is, I don't know whether it was mentioned first time, but this was already existing, and the real symbol is that Japan is becoming a partner. And there is another important point which may have been rattling China, is that freedom of navigation. Means basically we are giving China a signal that please don't mess up in South China Sea.
But we've not spoken about 2015 agreement on...
but by mentioning that, we have given very strong signal to China that you are messing up in South China Sea. I think that has also rattled it, plus our cooperation with the United States in Pacific region, Asia Pacific region, what they call an Indian Ocean, because China is also middling. China is also trying to act smart in this region. So I think it is a very good signal. This is a good strategic signal given to China. So let it take it, let it articulate as it wants to do.
Let the things play out and then take a call. So it seems very clearly that the strategic relations between India and United States seems to have gone one step further. There are some positive indications, but India will have to be wary and steer clear of any damage to its own interests. And as our panelists were pointing out, that the best solution lies in being self-dependent and taking independent policy decisions as far as neighbors are concerned. We'll come back again with a different topic and a different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.